So for this episode of Aristeia 99, we're talking about Bachmann. Bachmann Turner Overdrive is one half of the Chemical Brothers expansion. With a 5 initiative, 4 movement, 4 energy, and 3 health, at first glance you might be a little bit surprised. But as a support debuffing character, no, I think this is fair. His defense comes in at a blue and a yellow. This is, in a way, a little bit better than I was expecting. Certainly he does need the defense, but he also has that for his character switch, what we'll get to in a moment. His brawl is an orange and a shield, so he will automatically get his switch in that situation. Unless, of course, you decide, oh, I really need that shield to stop someone from moving. His disengage roll is an orange and a shield. So when he disengages, he will automatically get his switch. There's no reason to do otherwise, actually. This switch is a fun one. For the cost of 1 shield, you can impose the poison state to the target. Now, the fun thing with Bachmann, of course, is that poison is one of the only 2 states in Aristeia that stacks. So you can have more than 1. You can have 2, 3, 4, all the poison tokens on one character. This makes poison kind of a scary state in that particular regard, especially if you don't have a way to clear it all off. It is delayed damage, which I kind of like. Now the nice thing with Bachmann then, it means he can indeed put on, it's not quite uncontested damage, but it's still a way for him to get damage on. Now this is actually going to be a little more obvious when you get to his abilities. He actually has no intrinsic attacks aside from Contender. Contender being orange, range 1 to 8, line of sight required. If Bachmann has to use that, something has gone wrong. Or you've got a heck of an opportunity. Take your pick. So his first ability costs 1 energy. It's called Sample. It is an orange, it is a yellow, and it's range 1 to 5. So he's got a decent chance of getting success here, and a reasonable chance of getting his switch. Although dice being fickle things that they are, this is by no means guaranteed. If he successfully samples, he can remove a state token from the target and impose that state on himself. Now, before we really get into this, I need to go straight down to his orange ability, Immunized. You are not affected by any state imposed on you except Silenced and those modifying attributes. So your energy, your initiative, your movement. During the state step, do not flip or remove any state tokens you are not affected by. So, okay, so when this is really the crux of Bachmann. You see a state that you want, you grab it. So if you've got the other team, if there's a Hippolyta, I want that initiative bonus, yoink. If someone's going around with hidden and you're adjacent, yoink. So on and so forth. And while he can't use most of these states for himself, he can distribute them to anyone else. So if someone comes in off the bench, you can take that -2 energy and give it to somebody else for good or ill. So, and certainly for him, when he comes in off the bench, he comes loaded with a -2 energy that he can just pass on to somebody if he wants. So, Sample is his ability to take states away and store them on himself. After that, you have his green ability, Inoculate, 1 energy. It's an orange, it's yellow, it's range 1 to 5, line of sight required. Remove a state token from you and impose that state to the target. And this is the other side of Sample. So you can basically hand out buffs or debuffs depending on what you have. Now, if you're happening to play in a game that's relatively low on states, guess what? That's where poison comes in, because you can take poison and give it to others. So for instance, whether sample or inoculate, you see someone, hey, there's Gata, roll, I don't hit, oh, but I get the switch, and Gata gets poison. We'll do that again. Gata gets more poison. She only needs 2 poison on her to potentially kill her at the end of her next activation. And because it is not an opposed roll, she doesn't get to use her defense, so it's actually kind of scary when you think about it in that light. You are being sort of attacked, but vagaries of that aside, the outcome is a very real one. So that's cool. That's awesome. But you do have to, again, you need to be in relatively close range, and you do have to have line of sight to do either of these. Certainly, at the very least, getting things like immobilize or such off of your teammates is quite useful. And even just getting rid of that darn negative energy, well, everyone loves that. His last ability, or third ability, is Flux Capacitor. You can have any number of state tokens on you. This is a fun one just because it means you can have multiple immobilizes, you can have multiple stuns, multiple dazzles, multiple pretty much anything. You can hoard all of these things for yourself. Now, I do need to point out though that when you look at immunized, and this is the very important thing, so anything that modifies his attributes, his initiatives, moves, energy does affect him, but silenced affects him as well. So you do need to be mindful that if there is anybody capable of getting silenced on you, predominantly you were looking at Oberon, who at the time of this writing is the only at the time of this video is the only person who does that. If you were to silence immunized, then Bachmann is going to go up in basically a horrible explosion of ill will. Because if he has a ton of fire on him, for instance, burning, well, then it can all go off at the end of his turn. If you were to get a ton of poison on him, it could suddenly go off. You could effectively have everything on him, and he just implodes under the weight of it all. So there is an actual risk element as a result. Now, while I do want to mention that, I also want to mention there is occasionally times that you would actually want to silence immunized with Bachmann. He is naturally immune to buffs, so he can't benefit from focus. He cannot benefit from hidden, for instance. Now, if you could increase if there was a positive energy, that would work on him. Positive initiative via Hippolyta would work. Positive movements would, if there was such a thing, would work. But by and large, any sort of beneficial state would not work for him if it didn't modify his attributes. So if you actually had, say, Eclipse go right next to him, he would gain hidden, but he wouldn't benefit from hidden. It would just be one more thing he has. However, if he was silenced for immunized, got hidden, then he would enjoy the benefits of hidden for as long as it lasted. This is an important thing to note. It might be more of a fringe case, but it is, again, this is very much worth noting. So we're going to go into Bachmann's tactics. First up will be side effects. During the action step of Bachmann's activation, Choose a character within range 1 to 5, line of sight required, and impose the side effects marker to them. The character marked with side effects will only remove the side effects marker and damage tokens when they are placed in the infirmary. You then must flip all the state tokens on them to red side up. Okay, so I actually had to go and do some research for this one. Side effects is a very powerful card, but it's also situationally powerful. This is assuming that you're getting states onto targets, not necessarily poison, say, but also depends on them being taken out and going to the infirmary with those states on them. So let's kind of break this down real quick. First off, you're imposing a side effects marker to them. The side effects marker is just that, it's a marker. It is not a state. The wording here is very specific, and because if it was a state, you could clear it off. With the side effects marker on this character, basically what's going to happen is when they are sent to the infirmary, they're going to go into the infirmary, but that's at that time, only their wounds come off and only the side effects marker comes off. So the side effects, the effect basically is that their states, whatever you put is on them, is going to stick with them. So you're probably thinking, obviously, wow, this is amazing if I can actually take them out when they have states on them. And you are absolutely positively correct. So if you have Maximus there and he goes to the infirmary while he's immobilized or stunned or dazzled, he will continue to have that on him when he comes back on. If you can throw someone, a -2 movement, or go ahead and do that. -2 energy on them, not so helpful. They'll get that anyways. So that's really cool. Because when they come back into the Hexadome, they're already going to be hindered. They're already going to have those various negative states on them. Gosh, if you can get a poison or burning on them before they actually go out, so they could come back and possibly go right back to the infirmary. But another way to look at this as well, though, is say you're right next to someone, they're about to go out for whatever reason, and they're on your team. Well, what if you were to throw on, give them focus or hidden or a positive initiative, things like that before they go to the infirmary. You load them up with goodies, then you actually go ahead and put side effects on them, and when they come back, hey, I've got focus, that's going to help me a little bit better. If Lakshmi's on the team, I can get rid of this -2 with no problem. If you thinking about in terms of, is this a way I can help keep a buff on somebody, even though they've gone to the infirmary? So there is that possibility as well. Again, this says choose a character. It doesn't say choose an enemy. And that's really, really important. Next up is going to be Viral Outbreak. During the action steps of Bachmann's activation, remove any number of states tokens from your character card. Impose each removed state to any target within range 1 to 5, no line of sight required. And again, you see a similar wording here that it's for any target. So it can be a friendly, it can be an opposing team member. So, and this is one of those places where you see that Bachmann really does benefit from there being a lot of states on the board. So if the more that's out there for him to use sample with, the more he can pass out and influence the game in that particular fashion. The more debuffs going around, the more he can hinder everyone else. The more buffs going around, more positive states, the more he can help out his own team. This is great. And the fact that line of sight is not required is actually quite a nice benefit of the card, I'd say. Would I call this one noteworthy? Situationally, I would absolutely say so. I mean, honestly, same thing with side effects, depending what's going on. Viral outbreak is much the same in that regard. After that, we have transfusion. During the action step of Bachmann's activation, choose 2 targets within range 1 to 5, no line of sight required. Remove any number of state tokens from each of them, impose each removed state to any of the chosen targets. Okay, so it's 2 targets. You remove... It's basically the most obvious is you're switching good for bad. But again, this is any 2 targets, doesn't have to be friendly, doesn't have to be enemy. So you might have got a buff on one of your characters that really would be better off somewhere else. You swap them. And, you know, Bachmann's in the middle, he's at 0-0, obviously. So you've kind of got this range of 10 spaces to work with. One person can be up to 5 away, the other person can be up to 5 away. That's great. And that's a fair chunk of any part of the board, really. So, and there's no line of sight required, which is going to be important. So say you've got Eclipse or there, and she just gave gave Hidden to somebody, and for whatever reason, Dart doesn't have Hidden on her. Well, are they within range? Okay, well, I'm going to take the Hidden from whoever's next to Eclipse and give it to Dart. Say you've got Gata, who really needs to score, but she's got a -2 movement or -2 energy on her. You swap it around with someone else. Some of those things you could put onto... well, you can't put it on Bachmann in this case, but someone who's in a better position, so or at least it won't hurt them so much. You know, Gata versus, say, Moonchild in Dog Warrior form. It's like, a little bit slower is not going to really bother her. So this is and obviously, of course, if you want to just mess with the capabilities of the other team, I'm going to take your positive traits, or I'm going to give you these negative traits in return. That is the immediate obvious use of it, and that is a fantastic use. You should absolutely do that. But again, keep in mind, targets, it's not being specific, so you can target friendly characters. So be flexible. You should always be looking, with Bachmann at least, thinking of how you're going to move states around. That's really his biggest thing. Finally, we have absorption. During the action step of Bachmann's activation, until the end of the round, when any state is imposed to an ally, impose it to yourself instead. If you're placed in the infirmary before the end of the round, nullify the effects of this tactic. Okay, so very, very, very important to note. Until the end of the round, clear, when any state token is imposed to an ally, impose it to yourself instead. So this isn't necessarily something you want to be too crazy with. Primarily, if you're going to do this, you need to think about in terms of, I need to get my buffs to the rest of my team before I actually turn on absorption, because Bachmann isn't necessarily going to benefit from having multiple focus on him, for instance. You might have wanted to buff one of your, give positive initiative to Gata or whoever, but if she can't get it, it's no good. So you do need to be very aware of the timing on this. Conversely, going with a states-heavy team, or you're doing King of the Hill or something like that, say Valkyrie's right in the middle of the fray, you know that she's going to immobilize everyone because that's always to her benefit. You pop that, and all of a sudden she can't immobilize. All those states go to you. Likewise, poison, goes over to Bachmann. Oh, look, burning, that's cute, goes over to Bachmann. And you can just really mess with a control-focused team, or at least a team's control elements here. Hey, taunt, that's cute. I'm taking that. So that's Bachmann. He is actually a really interesting character. He's been very capable with the proper support. He is kind of squishy, and honestly, I think one of the inadvertent defenses he has against being killed, though, is that you don't want Bachmann to show back up and already have a -2 energy on him to give to someone else, because his sample and inoculate are cheap, and he can just pass that right along. But he is really fascinating. I think I wouldn't necessarily call him an easy character to use. You do need to be very deliberate. You need to be thinking about it. And if you don't build your team around him, and the opponent doesn't go heavy on states, it really limits what he can do. So you do want to be mindful, should you be doing a draft, of how the team selection is going. You should have in your mind when you want him to come in. Now, that being said, at the very least, hey, poison, that's something he can do on his own. So it's not like he's completely helpless, completely worthless, and he can still take off the -2 energy that state from people coming in off the bench. It'll be a -1 at that point. So there is that. You will have some tools that you're within arm's reach, but it's not the same as going in and having a state-heavy game. So, like, comment, subscribe. Next time we're going to be talking about Bachmann's brother, Hammerhead. Thank you very much, and see you next time on Aristeia 99.